Hey there! So I've seen a bunch of people make videos or written guides covering breeding and how it can help make you pan-son, the game's currency at the current end game. But I haven't really seen many, if anyone, really give criticism to the breeding system in the game. So I'm going to quickly break down how breeding works for anybody who hasn't really touched it yet, and cover a few of the problems that can occur during the process. Now, while I could cover basic breeding that doesn't care about SVs, I feel that might be a waste of time, as I've come across virtually nobody who cares about breeding unless they're making a more powerful or perfect Tem in general. So I'll only be covering 6 SV and 7 SV perfect breeding in this video. So to start off, I'm going to cover each of the individual elements that go into the process, beginning with the parents. Every Tem in the game is given a randomized set of SV values ranging from 1 to 50 for each of the different 7 stats. The final goal of perfect SV breeding is to take a handful of Tems who all have perfect 50 SVs in the different stats and merge them into one super baby. Now you can head out to a location and manually farm the parental Tems or buy them from other players. To give you the best chance of breeding this super infant, you'll probably want 14 or more starting Tems, a male and female representing each of the 7 SV stats generally. But even more than that has never hurt, and you might end up needing more regardless, but more on that later. Next up is fertility. Each Tem has their fertility represented by the little tree picture thingy on their details page. Every time Tems breed, this value is decreased by 1. Meaning that after a certain amount of breeding, they can no longer reproduce, and their usefulness is basically 0. Keep in mind though that fertility is directly affected by a Tem's SVs as well. So with 1 or 2 SVs that go higher than 45, the Tem's fertility is reduced by a single point. So you'll never find a wild Tem with a perfect 50 SV that also has 8 out of 8 fertility. It will always be 7 or less. Children also inherit the fertility from whichever parent has the lowest value left. So let's say your mother Tem has 7 fertility, but your father Tem has 3. After breeding, the mother would be left with 6 and the father would go down to 2. The baby Tem that hatches out of the egg will also have 2 fertility to match the dad's current fertility. This means that when you begin a breeding project, you want all of your Tems to have the highest amount of fertility to make sure you can reach the final product before the fertility hits 0 and you can no longer breed. This also dramatically devalues Tems who have already been through a single breeding cycle and only have 4 to 3 fertility left. They're honestly useless, it's kind of sad. And last but certainly not least, we have the DNA gear items. These can be purchased from the vendor inside the breeding house and are used to ensure that SVs are passed from parent to child. Let me explain why these are mandatory. Just before you drop your parents off to make a baby, you're presented with this screen that shows you what the child will inherit. I apologize now if this next bit is confusing, but I'll try and make sure it's clear, so please try and follow along. I'm sorry once again. Now, the game takes the SV values from both the mum and dad and gives you 3 possibilities for each stat. Let's say your mum has a perfect 50 in speed, but dad only has 12. The game will take these 2 numbers and generate averages. Your baby has a 40% chance to inherit the highest average, a 40% chance to get the middle average, and a 20% chance to get the lowest, worst possible average. This would mean that you're relying on a 40% chance to get that 50 speed passed on. These are pretty bad odds. And this is where DNA gear comes into play. By equipping the speed DNA gear to the mum, it will 100% guarantee that her speed value is passed on to the baby. So you've probably realized what this means. We have to buy quite a few DNA items and breed quite a few Tems together in order to whittle these SVs down to the perfect baby of destruction. This right here is a flowchart showing how to breed perfect Tems. This is the older one that shows the original prices for the DNA gear. They've since had their prices boosted by quite a bit though. Now, using this flowchart, you'll breed 2 branches of Tems, one side that focuses on the attack SVs and the other side that focuses on the defense SVs. You'll need to breed a minimum of 5 times per side before the final time in the middle where you obtain your 7 SV Tem. This means that each branch will cost you 26,000 Pansuns in the DNA gear alone, and then another 10,000 at the very end when you do the final tier 4 breed. This is 62,000 total, which for some players, I mean heck all players, should be a lot of money. It's worth noting that if you do choose to instead create 6 SV Tems instead of 7, that the total amount that you spend is about 20,000 yet less, but they are still subjected to the problems I'm going to talk about. Now, as I said, you need to breed 5 times per branch in order to meet in the middle. The way that RNG can absolutely ruin your plans is by getting the wrong genders. The game isn't too punishing if you get the wrong genders early on in tiers 1 or 2, but if 2 of your Tems make it to tier 4 and they're both the same gender, you're stuck, left with 3 options. Option 1. Head over to Discord, Reddit, or whatever other hub that you have available and try and find a trade where you can get the opposite gendered equivalent to whatever Tem you're breeding. And while this is a nice, quick, easy fix in theory, you will more than likely have a hard time finding others who have what you're after. Option 2. Go back to the previous tier and simply rebreed from the parents with your fingers crossed that you get the right gender this time. The issue here is that even if you do get the correct gender, the fertility will be 1 point less than its counterpart. This results in the egg having less fertility and means that you'll have less breeding chances left at the end when you try and make extra Tems to sell and recuperate your expenses. Option 3. Grab a fresh set of Tems and completely rebreed the branch so that you maintain fertility and aren't waiting around for the hopes that another player has what you're looking to trade for. And while all 3 of these options are viable in resolving your problem, only option 1 results with you gaining what you need with nothing to lose. Options 2 and 3 become very costly and force you to burn through more Tems, more SVs. And now that I've covered these, let me remind you that when it comes to breeding Tems, the baby will always be the same species as its mother is. So as an example, you have a male Ganki Chad who is breeding with a female Nestler, way to go buddy, and the egg will always hatch into a Nestler. So, when you're working on your branches for breeding, you want to have as many females of your chosen species as possible to ensure that your final Tem stays the same species that you wanted. Now, if in our example earlier you reached tier 4 with both branches and both of your Tems are female, that's not a huge issue, as you're more than likely going to find people who are willing to trade males for females. Plus, by having a female at tier 4, you're ensured of getting the species that you want as soon as you can breed with it. However, if you get to tier 4 and you're stuck with 2 males, well, they technically don't even count as the species that you want. Male Tems in this game only really matter in terms of their type, fertility, and what SVs they have. Like I said, only females affect the egg species. This might be the right time to mention that the likelihood of a Tem being male or female also varies from species to species, and the odds are the same ones used when evaluating what they are when an egg hatches. So if you walk out into the wild and you're expecting to find male and female Tem, when an egg hatches, it uses the exact same chances. So Tems like Ryber, Ochlera, Blues, and Nestler, who all have higher than average chances of being male upon birth. I mean, my god, Ryber, please, just be a girl for once. This can really throw a wrench in your works. Hypothetically, you want to breed a Nestler, but by the time you reach tier 4 of the flowchart, both of your Nestler have been born male. Not only does this mean you can't finish the breeding process, but you have virtually zero chance of convincing someone to trade you a 5 SV female Nestler. Let alone the fact that Nestlers as a species have a 5% spawn chance in the wild, and then add to that you need it to be a female Nestler with at least 1 perfect SV to begin with. Or, I mean, you can go and purchase a female Nestler with an SV from a player. They'll probably charge you a whole bunch more than normal Tems, but you might find one, you might get lucky, who knows. Your 2 rare male nestlers now have the same value to them as any other male tier 4 water or electric types. The fact that they're nestlers is irrelevant at this stage. Their species is invalid as they are not female. So, you'll need to acquire more female nestlers. Start from scratch. Hope that you can consecutively win that 30% female spawn chance at least a minimum of 3 times in a row. Nestler isn't even the worst example of this either, as Ryber, like I said, only has a 15% chance of being female. Now, some Tems are the opposite in that they can spawn with a larger chance of being female, making those species objectively easier to breed. Kinus and Gyalus have like 80% chance, and Banshees are just always female, so you're always going to get your Banshee. So, let's put all of the components together and see how this process can play out. The ideal outcome is that every Tem came out exactly as you wanted, and you succeeded with your 7 SV Tem. But you also have enough fertility left to multiply it, and not only recoup your expenses, but profit from it. The less desired outcome is that you did still manage to make your 7 SV Tem, but it cost all of your fertility and a whole bunch more Pansun in the process. So you can't make extra Tems, can't sell the extra Tems, can't recoup the price that you had to pay, and you've more than likely just spent more Pansun to make this thing than if you just saved and bought one from another player. And finally, the absolute worst result, the one that I've seen happen to other players more than I care to mention, including myself, is that before you even finish completing your 7 SV Tem, you run out of fertility, and you run out of Pansun, and you're forced to go back and farm and grind for more Tems, more Pansun, so that you can keep rebreeding the branches. Eventually, they might get the desired outcome, but the amount of time and money that you've sunk into a single project was far, far from worth it. Oh, and lastly, before I forget, yes, some Tems have one trait that stands out as being way better than their other one, and this can also mean if you're breeding Tems for sale, and you finally manage your final product, its trait might be the bad one, and that can automatically mean that it's 10 or 20,000 Pansuns less valuable. This does kinda suck, and I just want to throw that out there. Osiara, for example, has a really good trait, and a pretty meh undesirable trait, and this really is the difference between 10 to 20,000 Pansuns. So, the DNA gear is what drains away at your wallet. This stuff becomes really expensive really quickly. The fertility of Tems is what prevents you from recuperating loss or making profit. And finally, the gender RNG of the Tems is what can absolutely destroy your entire process and require you to begin from scratch all over again. And now, removing any of these core components to the breeding system would in one way or another break the game, as it's been designed with these mechanics in mind, whether it be ruining the economy because there is suddenly a flood of perfect Tems, or the process of making these perfect Tems is made so simplistic and so cost-efficient that there is no reason to sell or trade, as everyone can just make their own Tems with 0 time and effort. So, rather than try and come up with a supposed solution right here and now, I want to use this as a chance to start a discussion. Ask others what they think of the system currently in place. Whether they would change anything, and if so, what would you change? What would you do to fix this? Do you even think it's a problem in the first place? I also want to make it clear that I'm not making this as a means of attacking the devs for creating the system in the first place. I myself have been breeding for essentially the entirety of my endgame experience, trying to build a solid team for myself, and save up some Pansuns in the piggy bank as newer content gets released. However, considering breeding is currently one of the few ways of earning Pansun, I wanted to make this as a cautionary warning to anyone who wants to start breeding. The process is long, it's tedious, and if you're unlucky, you can find yourself having lost more money than you're gaining. However, with luck shining on your side, it is by far the best get-rich-quick method in the game currently. Thank you for watching, and please let me know what you think about the breeding system. Is it good? Is it bad? Do you have issues with it? Do you not? Am I stupid for thinking that there is issues? Your experiences, please let me know. What do you think of the game in general? Even if you don't care about the breeding system, tell me what you think of Temtem. What are you looking forward to? What team are you using? What starter did you pick? Do you feel bad that you picked Crystal? Anyway, thanks again. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.